Hello, hello. Welcome again to another episode of the All In podcast with Nate Peo. My guest today is Savi Barrowes. She is a high performance career coach. Have you ever in your adult life looked in the mirror and thought, wow, I thought I'd be further along in my career by now? Well, if you have, you're not alone. Savi is the creator of the 5 Secrets to Becoming a High Performer Bootcamp. She went from starting her life as a 15-year-old girl with no life prospects to attaining multiple degrees at some of the most well-known educational institutes in the world. She's held multiple executive roles with global responsibilities and led initiatives that have reached the highest level. Now she helps people develop the skills to get recognized by senior leadership, become confident, and be seen as the expert and authority in their role, and to finally get the career they've always dreamed about. Welcome to the show, Savi. How are you?
I'm doing great, Nate. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on the show with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. We've known each other for a few months now, but we've never really had a chance to sit down, chat, and get to know each other. So my first question is like, I'm always enthralled when people do, like, they go to the elite schools, because you went to MIT, right? And
Yes.
and then they get, the career of their dream.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, you know what? This ain't for me. I'm going to go become a coach of some kind. And I think a lot of people look at that and they're like, yeah, good for you. Go do it. But a lot of people have this preconceived notion, or maybe like, hey, what do you do? Like, what's wrong with you? Like leaving this amazing career behind to go do something on your own. So what was kind of like that thought process behind you of or maybe even start walking through, like, your background, the schools you went to and your career path, and then, deciding to leave it to go be a coach?
Yeah, no, happy to answer that question, Nate. So there are two parts to the answer. There are 2 parts to the answer, and I'm going to start with why I left. So the way that I view life is very much about, is my life serving the needs of me and how I want to be seen in the world? And I think that's really come from where I started out as a kid. I grew up in a pretty abusive family, was not really set up for success. And at 15, decided to take my own destiny into my hands and really decided to make life about, how can I be the best at whatever it is that I'm doing? And I've taken this view in life and applied it to everything that I do. So for me, a lot of people tend to look at careers as, money and promotions define who you are. But I have always looked at it as, I am going to be the best that I can be. And for me, money and promotions have followed. So I don't feel like I walked away from anything. When people are like, oh, you're crazy, you walked away from this, you could have worked at this company and made this money. There's a lot really packed into that. The thing is saying that, okay, well, your title defines who you are, which it's not. And that the only place that you can make money is working for a company, which is not true. I mean, the wealthiest people in the world, they've started their companies, they work for themselves. So my approach is that life is abundant, money is abundant, opportunities are abundant. And I'm constantly looking for ways to set myself up for success based upon what I need in my life. And then the other part of the question of, why this is, so I would say, for the last 3 years or so, I've been asking myself, how am I going to improve the world? How am I going to improve this planet and make it a better place than when I showed up? Because to be quite frank, career was not really making me satisfied. Like, yes, I was achieving a lot in the corporate world, but it was not making me a happy person inside. And I felt like there was a lot I needed to do to make myself happy, and a lot that involved helping others. And I kept delaying it for some of the reasons that you're talking about, really perception, right? So I think that before COVID, a lot of people perceived people who worked from home as like, okay, you clearly don't have a real job. Like, you're not really working, right? There are all of these negative perceptions, are kind of like you're slacking off. And I got caught up in that. And then also, when you are on this role of, you're building your career and things are going well, you're not really enticed to leave. But COVID really showed me that, you know what, like in a second, life can change. In a moment, things can be completely different. And I just realized that there was no point in me putting it off anymore. So I basically, started pivoting in the background to stand this up. So in COVID, I thought it was a fantastic idea to start a business.
Yeah, I find that the COVID thing really shifted a lot of perceptions of what it means to have a career. Like
Mhm.
in general, you worked where it was convenient, right? You had a place where you wanted to live, or you moved to somewhere where the job was, you got a job, and it was convenient. Like you agreed, like, hey, this is my prospects. I want to live here, and I'll commute to a certain radius, and this is where I can work. Whether you're not at the top of your level, or just kind of like, hey, I just got a 9 to 5er, and it gets the ends meet. But
Mhm.
whatever, it's convenience, close, and it pays what I'm willing to do. So you go do it, and you put up with things that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise: a long commute, or not having fulfillment, or trading financial opportunity for other priorities. And then COVID hits, and it goes like everybody's working from home, and you realize, like, at least if you're in like a information type role, knowledge type role, you can work basically anywhere. And then there's some stuff where you need to work at the office, or at a location. But a lot of people realize, like, hey, I can work just as fine from home, maybe better. I don't have to be constrained to driving a long ways to work now. I don't have a commute, or I can work anywhere in the world. And so, like, now your opportunities change. Like, I could have this job and live where I want to live, or I could live where I want to live and find a job that allows me the lifestyle I want to do, whether the hours are more flexible and all this other stuff. So you start looking like, hey, what's important to me? Fulfillment. And I think prior to COVID, I would have looked at, like, why does somebody need a career coach? Like, to me, that's like something that the business that you work for would provide, the training and the education to further your career.
Mhm.
But looking back on it too, now I'm like thinking, you should have a career coach, because there's so many things that your company won't provide for you,
Mhm.
because they might be worried you might leave, or or even if they're giving you the promotions and stuff like that, sometimes you do have to leave the company you're with to get the opportunities you're looking for. And so I'm like, hey, who's going to give you the advice that's independent and best for you, and best to set yourself up for success, whether it's staying with the company, getting the skills you need, or finding the opportunities you need to do. So I commend you for, like, going off and starting that. But what's been your take on what the future of employment looks like?
Well, there are a couple of things. So right now, I think that is, in terms of the future of employment, who knows really what that looks like. But I can tell that from the clients that I've been working with, COVID has really accelerated a couple of things. It's either people want to see that they're going to be moving up in the company a lot faster, because what's happened, and people have seen their friends and their family members gotten laid off from companies that they've given their lives to, or significant portions of their careers, and they, just like that, they suddenly didn't have a job. So this illusion that, hey, when you actually work for a company, you're secure, has been destroyed, because it is really an illusion. I mean, it's a good paycheck, but the minute that something happens like this, it's the company's job to protect the company, which means that they will need to lay people off, and that's just a part of it. So a lot of people felt like, they're not really an integral part of the team. But that's not really the case. I mean, companies have to make decisions, but to survive, so that they can go for another few years, and then they hire people back, and it's the cycle. But I think that a lot of people are starting to think about, well, what does this actually mean for me? And if I'm in my career, like, how can I really maximize that? And so specifically what I do for high performance career coaching, which is different from traditional career coaching, is I work with people who are interested in becoming at the top of their game. So they want to be in the top percentile of employees. They want to be executives. They want to be in those senior level meetings, and they want to run a division one day. And it's really teaching them about the techniques of how you go about doing that. I mean, many people think that when you hear high performer, it means you're working 100 hours a week, which is not true. Or you're just kind of like running yourself into the ground, which is not true. It's really about understanding some very core concepts and how you set yourself up for success. But how do you understand the psychology behind putting yourself out there as someone who is ready for the next step in leadership without going, hey, you promote me. Hey, I want to be promoted, right? It's this subliminal thing. And maybe you've seen it in some of my videos where I talk about the subliminal messaging of how you put yourself out there so people are actually recognizing you for your efforts and they come to you. And there's a very specific way to do that. And I personally wish that this kind of stuff was taught in schools. I mean, I obviously, you mentioned I went to MIT, and it's an amazing institution. But what institutions in general lack, no matter where you go, is that they give you all the tools. They're like, here's everything that you could possibly need. But the art is how you put it together, and that's just not taught.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Like when I was coming up in my career, there was a few people that are influential, and I will call them advocates. Is they were people, they weren't really necessarily mentors per se, but they were people that kind of took me a little bit under the wing, gave me a little bits of advice, but they always advocated to other people within the company that like, hey, you should pay attention to what Nate's doing. I think he'd be a good fit for this next opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember what they said to me is he said, hey, nobody's going to give you anything. If you want to get the next things out of there, you got to one, perform, and then two, you got to ask for it. And so whenever I was coming up through my career, I always tried to, the other thing they said is like, you have to learn the person above you's job and you have to train somebody, you have to train your replacement. So it was kind of like that. So I was trying to do more than my job description brought on. And I was trying to bring somebody else up and learn what I was doing. And then I would ask for things. So if somebody said like, hey, how did you rise quicker through the ranks? It was like, I didn't wait around for the opportunity to be given to me. I would go to people and I'm just like, hey, I'm ready for the promotion. They're like, oh, you're not ready. But like, go with like, hey, here's a list of things I've accomplished. Here's the reasons what I've done. And I want to get the promotion. I want to get the raise, or this is what it is. And 9 times out of 10, those things were granted to me because I asked. And then I'd watch other people that maybe were on the same path as I did that didn't necessarily ask. And they were like, hey, how'd you do this? How'd you get ahead? And then the other thing I started noticing too is some people wait for that promotion to take the leadership role. They go, well, when I get the promotion to that, then I'll be the leader. I'll run the meetings. Like, no, you start running the meetings before you're the leader. Like leadership isn't granted to you. You take it. Like people, like if I come into the room and I come in and I just say, I'm the leader, I've got the authority to run this room. And then I start building trust relationships. People will assume you have it. But if you don't go in there and you just kind of like wait around until somebody tells you like, hey, you're running the show, like, then people don't necessarily think, oh, well, you're the boss, but maybe you're just a manager, you don't have a lot of leadership credibility, and they're not going to believe in you first. So I think that principle that you're talking about isn't necessarily taught. Sometimes you get lucky with having people to advocate for you. And hopefully, like me, I try to pay it forward. But like I always tell people that have worked for me, like, hey, this is something you need to remember and share down the road with people. Like one day you're going to be having reports, you're going to have people that are looking up to you and you need to pay it back. So I always say it's like, you don't buy your boss lunch. Like you go out, your boss buys you lunch, and then down the road you buy your reports lunch. And that kind of goes with the same thing, like educate the people that you're taking up through it. So how did you like come across that notion that thing was really something that was missing, and that's where your skill set needed to go to help people out?
Yeah, so I think Nate, well, you definitely said a lot about some of the core techniques and the core things that you have to do in order to stand out. But you also have an entrepreneurial mindset, right? You own your own business. You've been your boss for quite some time now. So that actually goes to the post that I did today. Is, are you the CEO of your career, or are you leaving it up to people inside the organization to determine when it's up to you to get a promotion? And what happens is that when you, as you mentioned earlier, it's like when you sort of follow the steps and you sort of stay in line and you kind of blend in, like nobody really notices you. And what happens is that while you are sort of going along, there's another person who's like a Nate Pio who comes in and says, you know what, I'm leapfrogging this. I'm going to do this in a year. I'm not waiting 5 years. And they figure out a way to stand out, and they take the initiative, and they get on the radar of senior leaders, and they ask questions, and they're raising their hand, and they're finding things within the organization to help them use their skills to shine, to show, hey, this is why I'm different. And, signaling, right? This is a subliminal thing again, right? Signaling that you are a natural leader. So giving you a title is, the most obvious thing. But the reason why I saw it is because, quite frankly, just like you, and people would come to you and ask you how you did it, people would come to me and ask me how I did it. And I realized that I was just doing things that were natural to me that I thought were not a big deal. But I've helped so many people throughout my career before I made this my career officially. So many friends, so many colleagues get promoted and make more money. And I realized that it's something that I genuinely love to do. This is my most favorite job ever. And I love when I work with my clients and they have a breakthrough, or I help teach them about confidence and how to take action even when they don't feel like they're brave enough or ready enough. And it's really rewarding to me. I really feel like I'm helping people to change their lives. So, and I think that's the beauty of what I do, is that the things that seem really obvious to me are the things that are really challenging to other people. And I'm helping them to unlock another level in themselves. And it's just so cool to hear them go, oh my God, I would have never done this, or I would never thought of this, or I'm now better because you showed me how to do this thing. And it's just incredibly rewarding to take something that to me is so incredibly fun anyways, and then I get to do it for a living. Like, this is the ultimate.
Mm-hmm. I love it too, because like on one hand, I think probably people think like, hey, when I'm going up through my career, a lot of people think like, oh, I just need to get certifications. I need to get these accolades that say like I have these skill sets. But a lot of it is emotional intelligence that you have to be taught. How do you conduct yourself in meetings? How do you conduct yourself with authority? How do you build teamwork? And I'm not sure where you bring people into your coaching program, if they're like, 2 or 3 years out of school, or 2 or 3 years in their career, if they're a little bit more advanced. But my thing has been, there's always this big transition as you're going up through your career, which is you get hired, usually your first job, for what you can individually produce, right? Like they say, here's what we need you to do. You need to take this amount of information and put it into this computer and do something with it. And you get judged, or you judge your own performance on, did you get it done today, or did you not get it done today? And how much of this do you do? And then you do a pretty good job of it. Say, hey, you're doing pretty good. Like, hey, can you show some other people how to do it? We want to put you into a management role. And then you transition and you go, oh, it's not so much my job isn't based on what I personally can do. Now it's about what I can get the team to do. And that's a huge, huge shift, because one, a lot of times those people are people that were your peers. They were your friends. They're the people you went to the bar with after work, and now they're your boss, and you have to have a little bit of a line drawn between them. Or two, you can do the job quicker and faster than they could, but that's not your role anymore. Your role is to train people, get them all in alignment, and accomplish more together. And that's a huge, huge life skill that takes some transition. And I don't think that gets enough attention of getting people trained up on like, hey, as you become a doer to a manager to a leader. There's a difference between a manager and a leader, a big difference. Like you can be pretty crappy manager, but a real leader people are inspired to go the ends of the earth for, but nobody really just coaches through that. They just say like, here's the leadership book, learn on your own, or here's the principles. And like, not everybody gets it. So where do you fall in? Like, where do you bring people into your program in relation to where they're at their career? And what are some of the biggest obstacles that they're facing that they need to come to you to overcome?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. The first thing is that so the sweet spot for folks that come to me are typically around the 5-year range. I do work with some folks that have more than 10 years of experience, and so the 5-year range tends to be the range of like when people have enough experience. Said a different way, people have more confidence to feel like they're ready for something new. Like, I don't believe in this theory of you need to do something for 10 years before you're an expert. I think you can master the fundamentals and get 85% of the way and level up, because the truth is you're never going to be 100%. But for some reason, the 5-year mark is when people gain a lot of confidence and their soul gets itchy and they want something new. And for the folks that are a little bit over, 10 years, they realize that they've been doing things, but they're not really getting to where they want to get to. So it's really that range. And the thing that people need help from me the most with is really just being able to sort of peel the onion and dissect the things, like the behaviors that they need to do or the actual tactical steps that they need to do, and then how they combine it. Because as you rightly said, there's a difference between an individual performer and the manager and a leader. And each level requires a different level of yourself. And that means you need to think differently and you need to operate differently. But one of the things that I tell all of my clients, and I teach them how to do this, is to actually practice before you get into the role. So I teach them how to go ahead and sort of organize their own mini initiatives and how they practice their leadership skills, because it's kind of like, if you're going to go drive, if you're going to fly a plane, right, you do a lot of simulations, right? Even before you get your driver's license, you go to driving school, you do something to have a simulation. It's the same thing. I want to make sure that before they end up in those roles, full-on leadership role, it's not because you were an amazing high performer individually and they're like, okay, you're ready for leadership, boom, and then you hit a wall. That's like the worst. I've actually experienced that, so I can talk to it. But if you understand how to go about designing initiatives in your organization, it's better for you to kind of pilot your own initiative and fail that way, because then you can course correct before you have really big challenges. So I teach them, just like how, when people are in product development talk about prototyping and they have different versions of products, it's the same exact way with building your leadership career. It's like you want to prototype how you run a team, you want to prototype it around an initiative, and you want to make all the mistakes there. But leaders who are looking at you to put you in leadership promotions, they love to see that, because there's no leader, doesn't matter how many years of experience that they have, they're always making mistakes. And so the idea is that really you need to practice being very comfortable with making mistakes, because that's really what leadership is about. It's being able to progress towards your targets, hit your targets, and handle all of the curveballs and all of the mistakes that come your way with confidence and grace. And you don't get that kind of experience once you're in the role. Once you're in the role and you're doing it, it becomes very not graceful. So you want to get that practice before you get there. And that also builds confidence in the people that are going to put you in that role.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I was in a situation, I guess part of my experience was I was like the number 2 on a project for a year. And I remember the first day, my boss had been transferred to another project and I had become the number 1 for that project. And we used to have these morning meetings where we'd all walk out on the job site. We'd have, like, hey, this is what we're going to do this week and blah, blah, blah. And and I had hosted the meeting before as like, my boss was on vacation. So it wasn't like it was the first time I hosted a meeting, but it was the first time I went there. And it was my responsibility, and everything that happened from then on was mine. And it was scary, and it changed the way it was. But I was so worried about getting things wrong or not having all the answers. I was like, hey, they put me in this leadership role. I need to do it all. And then all of a sudden I couldn't do it all. And I think that was where I probably learned a lot from. I mean, we learn a lot from the mistakes we make, but I learned like, hey, the difference between the manager and the leader is the leader's not necessarily there to know all the answers and to solve it all and be the hero, the superhero. What they're there to do is, sometimes I think it's like herding cats. We kind of get everybody in the same room. Hey, this is what we want to accomplish. This is what the game plan is. We want to invite feedback and collaboration from everybody on the team. And then we want to push it there and execute. And when things go well, we reward and recommend and give accolades to the people that got us there. When things go wrong, we look inside of ourselves and say, hey, what could I have done better that would have made this more successful outcome, and take it upon ourselves to accept the faults. And so a lot of times that's a hard spot to be in, because when we're a new manager, a new leader, we're so worried about making those mistakes, and we're trying to make it all go right, and we're trying to force everything. There's so much out of our control that it's hard to do. And they're definitely, I think that's definitely an overlooked space. I can't think of very many companies I've actually worked in that had the time to really devote to people, to get mentored, to transition into, that 3-year to 5-year role of going from like, hey, you're kind of beginner to a senior leader in the company. How do we get you there? I mean, there's always the executive mentors and stuff like that, but it's that middle transition that seems to lack, because nobody has the time to spend hours with it. But if you invest in a coach, I think you're going to find your career is going to grow faster and further. One thing I've noticed too is a lot of times what you're getting compensated can be very different between what you feel confident and asking for, or knowing what's out there. So sometimes we go in, and I've given this example before, is, maybe you're hiring for a job, and the person coming and applying for the job wants 80,000, and your range is 90 to 100, right? But they don't know that. So you go, oh, they want 80. Well, I would have gone 90. If I give them 85, they're going to be happy they got more than they asked for, and I'm going to be paying less than I had planned to. So everybody's happy, but they didn't know that. But a coach might be going like, hey, you need to go in there with confidence and ask for what you think you deserve, and understand where those roles are, and kind of give you that guidance. Like, hey, don't be afraid to ask for what it is. The worst they could say is no, because that amount of negotiation adds up when the raises come. You get these raises, and they don't always go as far. That's your biggest opportunity to get a big raise, or like you can't get it and you realize like, hey, I've kind of bumped up to the ceiling of the company I'm with. If I want to progress further, I'm going to have to explore other opportunities. And the coach is there to help you see that and pull that out of you, and take you to that next level. So I love what you're doing with the coaching. What are some of the success stories you've had with your clients?
Yeah, so a couple of success stories. So one in particular, this client of mine was really struggling with how he was able to kind of position himself to get into a very senior role at a company. Not necessarily get into the role, but he needed to build bridges with some very senior people. And he felt that he didn't know how to do that. Number one, he didn't know how to stand out. And then number two, he didn't know how to make the ask, make the jump, because this was actually a level above the person that was managing him. So when we talked and we strategized and we basically, game planned, and we understood, okay, these are all the people that are in your sphere. These are all the people that have either influence or that you need to work with. And then we made a plan on how he needed to stand out in some very important and strategic initiatives that he was leading. And so what we did was we talked about, okay, what needs to happen in these strategic initiatives for them to be these golden nuggets that you can then go have a conversation and with this person and say, hey, I know that when you go to your boss, who's a C-level executive, you have these particular targets that you need to hit. Here is what I did so that you could actually go ahead and report that there were these successes. Here is how I contributed to the project. Oh, and by the way, can we have another coffee next month? So just being able to have the confidence to make the moves internally, which are things that are typically not done in this type of organization, for him to put himself out there and then be brave enough to go ask someone who's above his manager to have a coffee, to have a conversation, is huge, because this is how you plant the nuggets so that you can move up in the organization.
Yeah, I think it's all about remembering to be top of mind, the person that comes to the forefront of anything that there's a challenge, like, hey, who's going to be taking initiative and leading the charge on it.
Yeah. The one thing I want to add is that it sounds very easy, but you need to do it with grace, and you need to do it in a very deliberate way to where you don't look desperate, right? It's like if you start like spamming people and being like, I want a monthly coffee with you, they're going to be like, whoa, back up here. It's a little bit too aggressive. So it's very much about not just the practical, tactical stuff that you do, but the psychology behind how you approach people and how you get them to perceive you. It's less about what you do, but it's how do you control the environment to change their perception. It's almost like filtering the light that gets in through their eyes. Like, how do you do that? And that's the art of being a high performer, is switching people's perception.
I was just going to say, I mean, you kind of run the risk too of if you're bumping over your manager's head to go have a coffee with his boss or her boss, like, how is that perceived? How do you navigate, that with grace? So it's perceived as, hey, I'm looking to learn and be educated, not try to undermine the chain of command, or, disrupt what other people that are my colleagues at the company are doing, and then be perceived as a brown noser, or somebody that's kissing butt just to get ahead. But really, it's like, hey, there's a balance between initiative and, like you said, being a bit spammy and a bit fake. So
yeah, well, I think that people always have negative things to say about people who are getting ahead of them. That's just the way it is, right? It's either somebody or you're brown nose or whatever, but you just kind of have to ignore that, because really that stems from a place of they didn't have the courage to push the envelope and do what you want to do. And from my perspective, right, all of these hierarchies in organizations, like they're there for a reason, but I mean, that doesn't mean that you turn your life and your livelihood and your career over to it. Ultimately, you have to decide where you want to go. And it's about taking risks and pushing the boundaries and moving forward in a professional and graceful way. But that's why it's an art of doing it. And I encourage everybody to do it, because ultimately we are the one that drives our destiny.
Yes, absolutely. So next question I have for you is, what does it mean to be all in?
What does it mean to be all in? So that kind of goes to my purpose-driven life. For me, I'd say from I was a very, very young girl, I've always been really aware of mortality, and not in a morbid way, but more as a motivator. So everything that I do in my life, in my work, I think about, is this serving my purpose today of who I want to be, of where I want to go? And is this in my heart where I want to be and what I want to do? And if the answer is no, and then I do it, then I'm not all in. I'm lying to myself, right? But if the answer is yes, and I stay true to that, and every action I take is in service to where I'm going, then I'm all in. So it's really about taking a look at what is the life that I want to live? How do I want to be remembered? How do I want people to think of me? What do I want to be known for? And pursuing that inch by inch every single day.
Yeah, I love that. And it's something that's been a lot more in my forefront lately of the mortality of life, and just going like, hey, it's going to go by so fast. Do you want to wait for things to be where you want them to be 20 years from now? Or do you want to start creating that lifestyle for you today? So I've been taking a lot more steps that allow me to do the things I want now, versus down the road, and taking action, deliberate action. Now, not everything can happen overnight, but at the same time, it's like, don't live in an unfulfilled life going through the motions, because maybe someday down the road you're going to have it all and it's all going to work out. I think a lot of times, if you create a life that isn't in alignment with where you want to go, it's hard to leave that behind. And you're just still like, doing these things. An example would be like, hey, if I want to leave the corporate world because I want to have a harmony in my life of work and travel and friends and family, and have it all intermixed, but then you go and you work 90 hours a week slaving away and you don't have any of those things, are you ever going to get to that point 20 years down the road, 10 years, 5 years even, and go, oh, I hit the mark I wanted to, now I'm going to cut that 90 hours down to 35 and kind of mix in this work life? It's going to be hard to leave that behind. So I think you want to balance that out and create the vision of how you want your life in all aspects, concurrently, as you're moving forward with your career. So, you got to tell me, what is something about you that most people would be surprised to know?
Oh my God. I don't know if there's anything left, Nate. I've been like talking about everything lately, I swear. I don't know. I mean, I have to say that in more recent months, I've been more forthcoming about my personal life. So I've, I used to be very ashamed of a lot of the things that I've been through. It's amazing that, even 2 years ago, I couldn't bring it to myself to tell some people that I was really close to that, I had a terrible childhood, or that, or about my divorce and how that made me feel, being a, 20 something year old divorcee. Like, these are all things that I talk about very freely now, but I've hidden it for years, and I've put on a face for years. So I don't think that there's anything left. I give everything to LinkedIn. Maybe the only one thing is that I really can't stand exercise. So so when you make your post about, oh, I'm in the gym, I'm going like, this guy's crazy. It's like, it's not happening. I like walks. I love walks. I love that. I love, moving and being outside and whatever. But I mean, I can't stand exercise. So I think that's probably the one fact that now people know about me.
All know it. No, I love that you've dropped the guard a little bit of the vulnerability of who you are. And we don't have the time to get into personal branding for, I think personal branding for employees is going to be very, very big in the future, especially for people that are a little bit more like behind the scenes. Like, hey, I'm a programmer. Like, why do I need one? It's like, there's going to come a time where it's going to replace the resume, but that authentically being you at the office, I mean, there's a balance. Like, you don't want to be like I'm bringing my like drama of my life to work every day and everybody thinks I'm a complete mess. But at the same time, being authentically you helps you build these relationships, especially those relationships with people that are you're trying to get connected to, that are going to advocate for you. If you're just a robot, like they're not going to develop a rapport with you that they know, like, and trust you. And having a little bit of, hey, this is my story. I'm not wallowing in everything that happens, but it defined me. It's experiences I've lived that are uniquely mine that allow me to do what I'm doing. And then by bringing that up, I think it helps build that rapport that you're looking for. And it's a good example to put that out there. And it probably helps also the clients that you're working with relate to you too, right? Like, if somebody has a similar story, they're going to resonate with that. Like, hey, I was in the same boat as you. I felt the same way. And I felt like nobody was valuing me at my job. And they're going to go, I'm going to get what Savi's got because she's going to get me. And I think that that's just an underrated thing that's not talked about in the employment world. I know if we're all out there, solopreneur, entrepreneur space, like everybody's taught personal brand, personal brand, personal brand, but it's behind the scenes employee thing. It's like it's reputation. It's who you are. It's how do you show up? How does the world perceive you? And you want to be perceived a little bit of like really who you are. So we are running a little bit out of time. So tell me in detail, who are your favorite people to work with? The ones that just feel like, hey, I get them, they get me. This is like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. So gosh, I feel like, all my clients are my favorite. Well, specifically, I think because I'm looking for I help a very specific personality, right? So it's people who they already have made up their mind that they want to be CEO of their company, of a company one day, right? Whether it's the one they're working in, or they want to go start their own, or they're building out a division, or it's like they have this very go-getter mentality. They have this like inner Ferrari inside of them, and it's just dying to come out, but they don't know exactly how to get it out of them. So it's people who already have this drive and this fire. And I work with a lot of folks that are in tech and finance, and specifically, I think, 5-year career range. And like I said, I've worked with some people that are over 10. But really, it's for people who are at a point in their career where they realize that they've got it. They're good. They've got talents, and they really want to shine and really want to show it. But for whatever reason, fear of rejection, they don't feel confident. They feel like they don't have a lot to offer, or they're afraid to put it out there. Those are the kinds of people, men and women, that I like to work with and like to help, because really, it's amazing when they realize that they're really diamonds, just, masquerading as coal. And when you kind of scrape off all of that crud and they see how incredible they are, it's just an amazing thing.
I think you got a new hashtag is inner Ferrari. So awesome. So where can people go if they want to get connected, learn more about you, and see if you're a good fit to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to go is my LinkedIn page. And you can look me up at Savi Barrowes. That's also my website, savibarrowes.com. And then if you want to just go ahead and schedule a call with me, it's savibarrowes.com/info. And if you go to my LinkedIn page, that's clearly out there. So, easy to find me.
Awesome stuff. So all those links are here in the show notes. I encourage anybody listening to connect with Savi, reach out. If you do have a conversation with her, let her know you heard about her on the All In podcast with Nate Peo. So thank you so much, Savi. Really, really appreciate having you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Nate. Appreciate it.
You.
All right.